Hello YouTube and welcome to the channel. Now if you remember a couple of videos ago I did or covered how to get your metal geared plastic bodied kit axles to run smoothly, and in this video I'm going to cover the same ground but with the fully metal ones. What we're going to do is going to go through the common problems that I've had with these axles and trying to get them to run smooth. So on the front one, as on the rear, you have 3 grub screws that hold the main bevel gear on and the 2 drive ends, if you like, onto the shaft. Now what I like to do is, when I'm assembling them, is to leave all 3 of these grub screws slack, so there's a bit of play in all of them, and so the shaft can move in the direction that it sits in the axle housings. So when you rotate the shaft, the axle I should say, if there's any tight spots, the big bevel gear will be pushed out from the pinion gear. So you've got this sort of situation. So when it rotates, if they're too tight, this bevel gear will naturally move to a position where it's not as tight. So I'm going to say 8 times out of 10, that's all you need to do in order to get them to run in a smooth position. And then once you've got them to run in a smooth position, tighten the bevel gear Allen key up first, and then the other 2 at the other ends. And then, like I say, generally you've got a fairly smooth running axle and a blob of grease, and away you go. But in certain situations this is not enough, and you have to use a slightly more extreme solution. Now I've built this rear axle up, and basically it's meshing too tight, and I've as you can hear, there's a massive difference between that and that. So this is meshing too tight. Now I've tried assembling them with the grub screws slack, and tried them in several different positions. As you can see, they're still pretty slack, but to no avail. They're still binding too tight. And I've just put a pin through just to simulate how tight they'd be when they're built up. And this is obviously binding. It's way too tight. It's not smooth enough. So we need to get this a little bit smoother. Now, in effect, what's happening is this little pinion gear is pushing into the surface of the bevel gear too tightly. So there's too much friction there, and it's giving it that rough running. So what we need to try and do is back this this pinion gear off the bevel gear slightly. Now there are 2 ways which we can do it. The first is generally, I don't know if the camera will pick it up, probably not because it's very small. There's a tiny little shoulder on the base of this pinion gear, and if we get a needle file and just file it off, that'll allow the pinion gear we get a little bit more play in that sort of direction, but it generally will allow the little pinion gear to back off enough, or slacken off enough, where we don't get where the mesh is too tight. So we just slacken it off slightly, and it tends to be a lot freer running. Now the other way to do it, I've found, is to file part of that boss off, that lip there on the end of the gear. So we basically got a little bit more movement that way, and that'll help back the gear off as well. So that's what we're going to try on this one. Now, like I say, it sounds awful and it's way too tight, so I'm going to take it all apart and try and file that little face off there. So I've taken the shaft out of the housing, slackened the two little grub screws off. So you just take the end off and slacken it off a little bit more, because these grub screws sit in like a little recess on the shaft. So we take that off, take the two bearings off, and then slide the bevel gear completely off. Ooh, a bit more. So like I say, what I'm going to do is get a little needle file and just file a little bit of this end away. Now unfortunately I couldn't find my flat needle file, so I had a quick route in the garage and found this sharpening stone, and I've just used the coarse edge just to sort of remove material from that little boss on the end. And as you see, there's plenty of brass dust on the top there. So what I'll do now is reassemble it and see if it's any better. Right, put it all back together and immediately it's that much more freer. Okay, so we've reassembled. I've just tightened the bell housing on to the back, as it would be when we've tightened all the bolts up, so there's pressure there, and immediately the axle runs so much freer, it's unbelievable. So removing that bit of material from the end has just allowed the two gears to move apart a little bit, because the bevel gear is obviously going that way, and it's just, we've just backed the two gears off, so it's that much freer. Sometimes the machining isn't brilliant, and this bevel gear here is touching the two, or the material on the two halves of the housing, so it's actually rubbing on this this material here, so it's still tight. If you get a little file and you can just take a bit of material off there, it'll be different again. So as you can see now, that's gone from being really rough to, well, absolutely free as a bird. And when you're happy with the smooth running of the axles, don't forget to just split the halves and tighten up the 3 grub screws before you fully assemble them. So that's basically the couple of tips I have for building these axles, and hopefully it should cure, well, every single time I've used it, I've tried it, it's worked. If the axles are a bit notchy, a bit stiff, if you just take a bit of material off the end of that bevel gear there, and back that gear off slightly, get a little bit more play, but the axles are that much smoother. So hopefully if you follow these couple of tips, then you'll have super smooth running full metal axles from WPL. So if you've enjoyed this video and you found it of some use, give it a thumbs up, and if you're feeling that way inclined, hit that subscribe button at the bottom and subscribe to the channel for more similar content. Catch you next time guys, and thanks for watching.